with Hope in Maine, which is a food incubator, Commerce Rhode Island, which is Rhode Island's economic development entity, and a number of other groups, including Entrepreneurship for All. We had our first ever program in Providence at the offices of Adler, Pollock, and Sheehan. So hopefully after tonight you'll be on the mailing list and you'll get more information about our upcoming programs and events. But this is also the time of the evening that I ask our volunteer board, who I saw some of them out there networking before to stand up. So I see Sherry Alpert, Alpert Communications. Sherry, round of applause for Sherry, since she's the only board member. And Carl Kern, who's ex officio member, right, Carl? So. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our sponsors. So Bay Coast Bank is a sponsor of the Center for Innovation Entrepreneurship, and they provide not only the help, but the connectivity with their banking services to those 23 companies that are here. And of course, Adler, Pollock, and Sheehan, which is a sponsor, particularly through their IP group. Their intellectual property group holds regular office hours here at the center to meet with the inventors and companies that come into contact with us on a regular basis. So that is all. You didn't come here to hear from me, I am sure of it. You came to hear about blockchain and cryptocurrencies, a topic that is obviously topical, and one that I think we're all interested in hearing from the panel. But before we introduce the panel, again, I want to thank Tri Dang, who is our startup and industry liaison, for really spearheading this event and being responsible for it. Thanks, Tri. And we have the pleasure of coordinating this event. Actually, really, again, in terms of the impetus for this program came from a program that Frank Aiello, the founder of the Rhode Island Cryptocurrency and Blockchain Association, put together in Pawtucket a couple months ago. And here we are a couple months later doing a program at the CIE. So we hope this is one of the first collaborations with the Rhode Island Blockchain and Cryptocurrency and Blockchain Association. And I'd like to introduce Frank to introduce the panel and the association. Frank?
Thank you, Toby. Thanks. Just really quick, guys, I'm going to be very brief. This event tonight is brought together by TokenFest. TokenFest is a global trade show. It's all around the world. The last one's in San Francisco. The next one's going to be in Boston. Everybody attending this event will get an email with a coupon code to get 50% off the ticket that's happening in September 13th and 14th at the Boston World Trade Center. I want to thank everybody for being here. This is something I've been pretty passionate about. I can't be more thankful enough to have this amazing group of panelists here. I'm going to let John Hargrave, our excellent moderator. John is probably the best moderator in the space I know. And I'm going to let him introduce the panel. And I just ask everybody hold questions till the end, and let's have a great event, okay? Thanks so much.
Thank you, Frank. This is the greatest time to be alive, isn't it? It is the most exciting time in human history. My background is I started my career during the dot-com boom. I worked for a computer publisher named Ziff Davis. They made these magazines, remember those? These colored stacks of paper that were sold in bookstores. And computer magazines like PC Magazine. And I was there during the dot-com revolution at a technology company. And I thought, this is the most fun I'm ever going to have in my life. It was so exciting. But if anything, this time is even more fun. The blockchain revolution has more excitement, more talent, more innovation, more money, and it's moving so much faster than the dot-com revolution. We are so lucky to be alive at this time in human history, and I'm so lucky to be joined by this all-star panel. These are some of the smartest minds in blockchain today, and really such a diverse set of experiences and skills that they bring to the blockchain. So this is really going to be a great evening. And I thought we could start if each of you could just say a few words about yourself and your expertise and interest in blockchain. And then the way we're going to do this tonight is I'll say a few words in between to kind of educate you on the basics of blockchain. And then we'll kind of open it up for panel discussion in between. That sound good? Good? Okay. So why don't we start? Navroop.
All right. Is this on? So now you know I work on technology. Okay, I guess you're online now. Yeah, so my name is Navroop Sahdev. I am a fellow at MIT Connection Science, which is a group working on network science with the Human Dynamics Lab. Also a fellow at UCL, University College London, Center for Blockchain Technologies, around 100 scholars working directly or indirectly with distributed ledger technologies. Also, we're building a trading platform, which is really my day-to-day job for crowdfunded equity, and so work simultaneously in academia and industry, and pretty uniquely positioned, I'd say, in the sense that my background is in economics, and there actually aren't a lot of economists in the space. So, for those of you who have an econ background, join forces. Also, I co-authored Hyperledger's Blockchain for Business online course. We have around 100,000 students who registered for this course. So that is a resource out there for you if you're looking into the enterprise use case of the blockchain.
So my role really is I'm a translator of all this stuff. It's very complicated, it's very technical, and I try to just explain this stuff in plain English. So I'll be assigning each of you kind of nicknames. So can we call you the Harvard economist? Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay, great, thank you. So this is your Harvard economist.
I remember my thesis there, that's all.
All right. So Peter, yes.
Can you guys hear me? Just making sure, that's the first question. So my name is Peter Boruk. My background is I'm from Wall Street. I used to manage multi-billion-dollar portfolios in equity and equity derivatives. For the most part, I was managing equity swaps. After that, I switched into alternative assets that have uncorrelated nature to the traditional asset classes, such as stock, bonds, commodities, effects, etc. That's where I got introduced to the cryptocurrencies, because a couple of years ago they used to be and still are alternative assets. Long story short, after a year or two, I understood that I don't know anything about cryptocurrencies, and they just move up. And I wanted to know why they're moving up, so I started moving into the blockchain space. So as I'll help John translate it really fast. So cryptocurrencies is layer 2, blockchain is layer 1. So blockchain is the technology behind it, and cryptocurrencies is the application of blockchain. But blockchain has 20,000 different applications. Cryptocurrency is just one of them. So Bitcoin is great, but just one of 20,000 applications out there. Currently I am a blockchain solution architect at Blockchain Driven, one of the top consulting companies in New York. I'm from New York. I'm also a partner and algorithmic trading head at AxiomB, the cryptocurrency hedge fund out of both Singapore and the United States. And today I came here to present one of the things we're working on for retail traders, and I'll talk to you about this really in a second. I also wrote a book, the second edition of the book, Blockchain Applications in Finance, is coming out sometime in the second quarter. Literally any single day can come out. So my first question to you really fast is just to spike it up. How many of you guys hold cryptocurrencies in the room? Okay.
That's about half of you.
That's pretty good. Yeah, that's actually a pretty good crowd. Now, how many of you guys are trading them actively?
That's about 15%.
How many of you guys are down since the beginning of this year? Be honest. Come on. So now, how many of you guys are trading cryptocurrencies using tools? How many of you guys are trading cryptocurrencies using sophisticated tools? How many of you guys are down again? Okay, maybe that's because you don't use any tools. Maybe that's because there are no tools on the market. So we learned from our expertise. I mean, I'm living in plain edition. I'm traveling all over the world. And every single time we present our hedge fund, then we have 20,000, I use the word 20,000 because there are a lot of requests saying, hey, should we buy Bitcoin? What do you think about Ethereum? What do you think about this amazing ICO called SHIT coin? So, what do you think about it? And instead of me replying to all these requests, the idea came out that how about we create a tool that would use institutional trading analytics from our hedge fund and apply that to retailers. And that's what I'm here for. It's, well, right now it's under the nickname cryptotradingtools.io. So if you guys want to visit the website, it has all the information about it. I was supposed to present something, but apparently no presentation. So all the information is on cryptotradingtools.io. If you guys are interested, check it out. That's
So I'm going to summarize all that as former Wall Street guy. All right. Ali.
Yeah. Can everybody hear me? No. Perfect. So my name is Muhammad Ali Chaudhry. You can just call me Ali. No. My name is Muhammad Ali Chaudhry, and you can just call me Ali. I'm a data scientist and research fellow at the Harvard School of Public Health. Mainly work on large databases to study health economic questions in the US. I'm also the co-founder, one of the 5 co-founders of Encrypt, which is a distributed content hosting platform for journalism. And this is to counter authoritarian censorship, authoritarian governmental censorship of journalistic and media content.
And you're actually a doctor.
I'm a physician.
A physician as well. So you're like the blockchain doctor. Block doc.
Block doc. Block doc.
Yeah.
Check that domain name. It's available. Block doc. Block tie.
So, good evening. My name is Giovanni Feroci. I'm going to have to give a little bit longer presentation only because I wanted to make sense why I'm up on this panel as well. So, I've had different careers in the private sector. I've been primarily in consumer retail, in the eyeglass business, all the way to the jewelry business, primarily in accessories. As the former CEO of Alex & Donnie, I had an opportunity to resurrect an industry. So I really think that's going to be a key word this evening, is industry, to understand what it takes. And so I had a situation where I had 23 employees, took it to 1,084 direct, and created 4,000 jobs in Rhode Island. So by resurrecting an industry. Secondly, I've had a military career, spent 24 years, excuse me, in what I call a pre-9/11 career and a post-9/11 career. So the pre-9/11 career, you know, it was focused on Dunkin' Donuts and what time we can get out, okay? Post 9/11, the operational tempo was dramatically increased, and having been assigned to United States Central Command as a ground operations officer and then became an interagency operations officer, I understood the difference between strategic planning and all the operational and tactical efforts that needed to take place to make things happen. So again, I think the key takeaway from my military background is, you know, understand strategic thinking as we go through this process of creating this enormous industry that's going to happen here, is happening, and where we're going to catch it. And then lastly, on the political side, I am a former state senator, focused on labor committees, corporations committee, and was the joint secretary of the Joint Committee on Veterans Affairs. So that said, you know, I would just say I look at this as an opportunity for us that's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to revisit something we've already lived. We've lived through the internet, okay? We've already done this. So just pay attention to where we are now, and I hope I can add to the conversation with some of my experiences and what I now am committed to, which is to make Rhode Island the blockchain hub of the United States of America.
Thank you, Giovanni. Yeah. Woo! So soldier, senator, CEO. You're all three. And I'm excited to have you because you really can help kind of bridge the gap between how government should think about it and how industry should think about it. So let's talk more about that. Anand.
Hi, my name is Hanan Rosenthal. I came here from Israel about 28 years ago calling my girlfriend. My parents thought that it would be funny if they sent me here with no money and no high school education. So I got a lawnmower and tied behind my bicycle and make some cash. And then one day I took a computer class, quit my job, called myself a Mac consultant. And that was that. Within a few years, I was creating big financial automated systems for New York Times and Fidelity Investments. And don't ask me, I have no idea how all that happened. It sort of did. But 6 months ago, I literally dropped absolutely everything. I had this knowing after getting involved in crypto that is what I absolutely have to do. And I want to take just a minute to try and explain why I did that. And when I say drop it, just put everything on low fire in the back burner and move my life to that space. It's a big question, which is technology a good thing or a bad thing? And you can always say, well, it's agnostic, it's what you do with it, and it's a little bit like rocks, right? There's a rock, you can build a house with a rock, and you can hurt somebody with a rock. But really it has to do with what rocks you have. So if you quarry rocks that are square, you're most likely going to build a house with them other than hurting somebody. So what kind of technology do we have? And so let's say that I'm walking down the street and somebody stops me and says, hey, here's $10 million, go build me some technology. What I'll probably do with the technology I have right now is I would take it, I would create a service, it would have a server, probably some mobile device using the internet, and I would try to get all of you hooked on it. And then once I get you all hooked on it, using it, I suddenly have a whole stream of data and a whole bunch of money passing through my server, which I'll try and grab as much of it as I can. Of course, and then I'll have your data and I'll be like, well, they sort of signed that they agreed to have me use it, so I'll start to sell it. Maybe I'll sell it back to you guys, for a fee. And that is because this is what, it's not that this technology is evil, it's sort of built in a way that this is what it enables you to do. And what happens here, see, I grew up in a kibbutz in Israel where we were, it was a purely democratic society where we lived on a principle where everybody always takes care of everybody. There's no such thing that somebody falls ill and they have to figure out if they have insurance or if they have to go bankrupt. Everybody always were taken care of. And it was a big shock for me to come here and realize that was not the way it was everywhere. Little kibbutznik coming to Providence. And always technology dismayed me because, you have a company with lots of people and they build stuff and they build cars and then a robot comes along and builds the car for them. And it sounds like a really good thing, but really now all the money, instead of going to the people and their family, goes to the guy at the top and those people are out of work. But what this new technology brings us is that it's not that it's possible to build democratic systems, it's that there's an incentive for me if I, again, walk down the street and somebody says, hey, here's $10 million, build me a decentralized blockchain technology, it would be my interest to build something where you guys are in control of your funds and of your data, and it's democratized and decentralized, and that would be a good thing for me as a developer. And that's why I'll be damned if I'm not a part of this whole revolution that is happening right now. And I intend to be, and so should you guys in some way. That's that.
Yeah, I met Hanan at Frank's last event, and I've had the pleasure of working closely with him. You are the most decentralized, the guy who embodies the spirit of decentralization. And I think it comes from growing up on a kibbutz, right? Where you were in very close and everyone was all for one and one for all. But you really embody that spirit and just pitch in wherever. So I'll call you the decentralized developer.
I saw a kibbutznik coming. I'll take that. Sure.
So I think I'm the least qualified person on the
Oh, that's not
my
true.
background.
Not true.
So my background
The
is
most humble, maybe.
There we go. I'll take that. Smallest ego by far. So my background is mostly in enterprise software, to name a few, and much of what I've been doing for the last 3 or 4 years has been working with medium to large companies and helping them understand new technology that's coming down the pipe. And so inevitably, blockchain came on my radar about 2 years ago, and as Hanan and just about everybody else I think has touched on, it is a proverbial big deal. And as much as it has been hyped like crazy and people are talking incessantly about it, and there's a whole bunch of technobabble that makes no sense to the average human being, this really is a big deal. The ability for it to transform and change society, technology, the way we do things, is really pretty astonishing. And the further you get into it, the more you see that. And I think I'd sum it up by saying, you know, if you think about the World Wide Web and the internet as being a way to change communication, right? We no longer had to go through a publisher like a Ziff Davis. We could communicate one-on-one, one-to-many at no cost with almost no friction. If you think about the sea change that caused and where we are now, and then you think about the same kind of transition happening but with transactions, that's basically what the blockchain promises. It promises transactions that can be frictionless, extremely low cost, without needing a trusted middleman in the center of things, messing things up. And everything we do is fundamentally a transaction. So that's where I'll stop.
That's a beautiful summary of where we're going to go next, so I appreciate that. I'll call you the blockchain entrepreneur, if that's all right.
Sure.
All right. So we asked how many of you hold cryptocurrencies. How many of you are new to this space? How many of you, if you could raise your hands high? So that's about half of you. So I wanted to start just with a few slides on kind of what we're going to talk about tonight. So we really are going to go through the basics, and we will try to get into the more advanced stuff as time allows. Be a learning sponge. So you see, I'm always taking notes at these events because it moves so fast that I just try to learn constantly. I encourage you to do the same. The other thing is, talk to people while you're here. Meet people and talk, because that is the value. Every good thing that's happened to us in this space has been because we come to events like Frank's and we met people and we form these relationships. So take advantage of that tonight. You're in the right place. The common sense disclaimer here is that tokens, blockchain, Bitcoin assets are highly risky. Do not invest more than you're willing to lose. And the way that we talk about it at our website, Bitcoin Market Journal, which is a website for investors, we say think of it as a small slice of your overall portfolio and be willing to lose it all, right? Like consider that tuition paid for learning about this new asset class. On the other hand, do invest a little bit. Do a little bit, because then you have some skin in the game and you'll find yourself thinking about it all the time, and it will become so intellectually fascinating to you and you'll be totally on board. So I want to talk just a few minutes about this time in history, because it really is a moment. And the gold rush was a similar moment in American history where people left their families behind and they risked everything to move out to the West Coast in hopes of finding gold. And many did, and it was that huge explosion of wealth that came out of that initial gold rush that not only built out the west coast of the United States, but it also then laid the tracks, literally, for the railroad, because we needed a way to get that wealth from the west coast to the east coast. And speculators were very, very excited about the railroad, just as they were excited about the gold rush, because everyone saw the potential of this new technology, and railroad stocks went through the roof. And then there was a crash. But in that initial speculation, in that mania, that's what built the capital that enabled us to build the railroads, which really did transform our country. A few years later, we invented the stock market. And think about how weird this must have been for people, that you're buying a piece of paper. Why does the piece of paper have value? Because we all agree that it has value. That's why. At the end of the day, And that must have been such a weird shift for people to make. But it was a huge revolution because we don't want to buy the whole company, we all want to buy a piece of a company. So this enabled everybody to now invest in small pieces or shares of companies in the same way that we can now invest in pieces or tokens of these blockchain projects. And then of course the internet revolution came around 2000. If you were around during that time, you remember this enormous speculative bubble going up to 2000, and then this huge crash, and then another bubble, and then another crash, and now today it's even higher. And what you have to realize is that out of that early dot-com fervor grew the Googles and the Amazons of today. So it seems to be in the nature of these giant revolutions that that initial excitement provides the capital to build the tracks or the framework that the biggest companies of tomorrow will use to grow. And that's what's happening right now with the blockchain revolution. We really are laying the tracks for the next generation of financial services. Some people call it the Internet 3.0 or the Internet of Value. And the biggest companies of tomorrow are being created right now on the blockchain. So that's where we are in human history. Now there's this model that is popular on the web about the 4 stages of bubbles. And I wanted to open up to our panel here, if you guys can see this, where you think we might be in the 4 stages of the bubble, if you agree with this, and where you think. And here you can look at my laptop if you guys can't see it on the screen.
Yeah, I would say the institutional investors. And it's funny because you would think capital is good. And
So you're saying right here, somewhere here.
Yeah, somewhere there. So the first 10 years are where really, you know, the crypto anarchist community is looking at this as a way to bypass the global financial infrastructure. But I really think it's the institutional investor phase now. I think there's a word of caution here because in a way it sort of dilutes the decentralized internet, like Hanan mentioned, the promise of decentralization and distributed systems. Because you know, John and I work together on this paper on ICOs, and what we're looking at is what started out as a way for crowdfunding capital or crowdsourcing capital is now becoming something of they're only private sales, right, and only open to accredited investors, like we're talking. So yeah, I think I want to hear more from the panelists as to what their views are, but I think they're looking at a more hybrid model where the VCs come in first and they don't want to be left behind and their business model is being attacked and, you know, and they want to be part of the revolution.
So you think we're still kind of early in this? Anybody
Definitely.
else have a different point of view?
Sure, I'll bite.
Thank you.
So I think the graph is wrong.
Okay.
Just to be contrary. The reason I say that is I think we are massively zoomed in. How many people here have seen fractals? Have you seen fractal patterns? That ring a bell with anybody? Okay, so a fractal pattern, you know, when you zoom in, there's more and more complexity, and you quite often see the same pattern repeating again and again and again. At a macro level, across 10, 20 years, this graph may apply. I think it also applies over incredibly short periods of time as well, like a period of weeks or months. So I would argue that, yes, we're in this curve. We've maybe gone through you know, the peak of the initial bubble, but we are still, if you zoom way the heck out, we are still way to the left of this curve. In internet years, I would say we're in like 1998, 99-ish. I don't think the real bubble has even begun to start.
So you think that this is a repeating cycle that's going on, and we're so close and zoomed up into it that we can't even picture where we are yet, but there's tons of room to run, is what you're saying, right?
Yep.
All right, Peter.
Really fast, right? So those of you who have cryptocurrencies, you guys want the wave to continue, correct? And we hold cryptocurrencies here, and we also want it to happen. And the reason why we're saying what we're saying, that we are too early, there are a couple of reasons. First of all, what's the total market capitalization right now of all cryptos? Let's just do facts. I don't want to say in my opinion, because it doesn't matter. my opinion doesn't matter. Facts matter. So what's the total market cap of cryptos right now?
Yeah, about 300 billion.
Half a trillion, right? Okay, now let's look at Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, Western Union together. How much are they? Total market cap. A little bit the same, almost $750 billion, so 0.75 trillion. So now we're assuming that we're saying, okay, fine. So if blockchain can replace payments, which is one of the first industries it can replace, then at least the market cap has to be 750 billion, right? So there's at least another 50% upside, from 500 to 750. But now let's look at all the other industries, because again, I live in the plane, because we go all over the world, talking to private, public enterprises, and we see that cryptocurrencies will impact governments, they will impact healthcare, they will impact supply chain, they will impact financial industries. And financial industries not only payments. In financial industries you have future contracts, you have crowdfunding, you have all kinds of new things. So if you accumulate all this market capitalization together, it easily comes down to at least 2 trillion, right? So now you have half a trillion, you'll have 2 trillion in the next 3 to 5 years, so at least there's another 4 times upside from here. Plus institutional players did not even come. George Soros announced that he came into, or he's considering investing into this space, but good luck. Good luck figuring out the custodian services, good luck figuring out the administrative services and all the other things on the back end that would prevent him and other institutional players right now to actually invest. When they do invest, there's another spike.
So Peter, you're in agreement with Nicholas, there's a lot of room to run still.
A lot.
All right, anybody feel differently? Yes, Ali.
I kind of agree with like most of the panelists here. The only thing that I would say, the only thing I would say around here is that there is a build-up still that's going to happen. But the most important thing is there's going to be a selection pressure. It's not going to be an indiscriminate build-up that happened like before. It's going to be a selective build-up of cryptocurrencies and blockchain projects. So only the projects that are providing real value are going to go up, and there's going to be a selection of all these other projects that were what I would say long blockchain, if you heard about the Long Island iced tea thing.
This is probably, go ahead.
I'm just going to jump right here with the thing about market cap. I guess, Peter, I have to disagree with you here, and I'll make this point. How many people in the room know what the market capitalization of a company is? Raise your hands. Don't be hesitant. Okay. So the market cap of cryptocurrencies. Raise your hands. So these two are actually very different concepts. The market cap of cryptocurrency is simply the number of coins that are out there multiplied with what the price of that is. It has nothing to do with the assets of a company, its revenues, its clients, so on and so forth. So do not confuse, as a cautionary note, the market cap of cryptocurrencies with the market cap of traditional asset classes. So yeah, I don't know, with that, the way we crunch some numbers, yeah.
Let's crunch some numbers. So I was in the Forbes article that was mentioned about a month ago on decentralized computing, and that was about the evaluation we conducted back in January on cryptocurrencies. And cryptocurrencies are not valued as stocks, but they still have assets. All these mining machines have assets. All these computers were bought for dollars. So if you look at Bitcoin, the overall Bitcoin valuation right now is about right, given traditional Warren Buffett kind of valuation. Yes, it does not have the profits, and it does not have the return earnings going back to in some one pool, going back to, in a centralized fashion, going back to investors in terms of dividends or in terms of further investments in the company, but based on the total assets that this whole network has, it is competing against Amazon Web Cloud, it's competing against IBM Cloud, it's competing against all the other cloud computing services we have right now. On the panel at Capri, and Adam was actually my moderator, he's somewhere in the room, we were talking about how blockchain can compete and kill all the data centers in the next 5 to 10 years. So there are a lot of assets underlying cryptocurrencies that actually give value to them.
Giovanni, you have been around for like the .com, and the one question I like asking people is, where are we if we think of this as like the .com days? Are we at like 1994? Are we at like 1998? Where do you think we are on that continuum?
I'll give you a quick funny story.
I like stories.
I once had, when I was in the optical industry, I had 21 locations in 11 states, and I left that to my brother, who's a small businessman, while I did some other activity in the military and so forth. And when I came back, we had two stores, and he got rid of our website because he thought computers were a fad. So, but aside from that, you know, surviving that, what I was drawn to immediately when I looked at that was because, you know, as more of the layperson up here, not the technician type, the reality is that media plays a role in all of this. And so as much as we have, you know, false positives, I believe that there's a lot of false negatives that we're monitoring right now. So in this case, you know, one of the things that I've been trying to focus on, in the case of Rhode Island, let's say, or any other state that wants to take a lead, was to exempt utility tokens from state securities laws. And the reason for that was the fact that they're not securities, right? So because they're not, you know, they can't be traded for. They're traded for for goods and services. They do not trade on a traditional clearing and settlement infrastructure. So the bottom line is, if you try and treat it on an outdated Wall Street infrastructure, it wouldn't work. But more importantly, for me again, at the previous slide, you know, you had the large companies, right? The Amazons, the Googles, all these companies down there that were built off of the last bubble, as you indicated. Well, they're all the target of what's trying to be collapsed now. So, you know, I look at it totally as an opportunity now for us to just fill that in. And I don't think there's top line numbers right now. I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So they're the ones. The incumbents are the ones that are going to be disrupted by all of this new technology. In other words.
Yes.
Yes. Hanan.
Yeah, it's very important to separate the price of a coin from the space in the technology, because, you know, lots of people that should not be investing in cryptocurrencies and moving money around and putting it in Ethereum and then in Ripple and not understanding why Ripple can't be tens of thousands of dollars like Bitcoin. The price of a coin moves up and down, and then the technology is going to keep on growing at the same steady pace, and it's going to be really huge. So back to Navroop's point here, how big the size of all the coins in circulation right now is really it's an indicator, but it's not that important of an indicator. And if you focus on the price of a coin, and you know, there's so many silly people that wake up every morning searching for their iPhone to check Bitcoin price. You know, I was one of them for like a very nasty week of my life. Yeah, it's just stupid. But does that have anything to do with those companies who are trying to figure out how to change the way healthcare data is being maintained and moved around, and the rights for viewing it is being controlled by the patient and not by some corporation? These two things really have very little to do with each other. It needs to be separated.
Yes and no. They do have little when it comes down to 99% of projects right now that are called SHIT coins, although they all have different names. But when it comes down to decentralized projects, the difference between this new business model, explained blockchain, and the old business model is that in the new business model, you can be compensated through crowdfunding. So if you do offer a product or a service that is really, really useful to a client, the client will actually buy the tokens and use them as utility. And by creating a demand, the price of tokens might potentially go up in value, thus profiting the founders of that project. So just because 99% of the projects right now do not offer much value because they're just trying to use, the green factor, because just everything is spiking up, that's true. However, there's a number of solid projects out there that are destined to go up because they do offer utility value and they do have correct valuation.
Okay, we're getting really into the weeds here. So I'm going to offer a refreshing palate cleanser here. This is like a sorbet, if you will. How many of you have seen this John Oliver piece on cryptocurrencies? Only a few have seen the cryptocurrency piece. I'm just going to play about 3 minutes from this. He does such a good job explaining this on his show. Is there any way we can get a little louder volume on that? Can we hear that? We cannot hear that.
Put the microphone next to your computer.
Yeah, I think it's coming through the sound system here, though.
Is it that over there?
Somebody do that.
Anybody? Any tech support here that can help us with that? So ELI 5 for me, cryptocurrencies. Peter, this is going to be a challenge. Let's hear it.
It's going to be easy. So, first of all, John, you're absolutely correct. So right now, Bitcoins are used more like a stock, and that's the best definition in the United States. But let's move to South Korea. So in South Korea, 30% of people are using cryptocurrencies to buy stuff, to pay for products and to pay for services. And just because the United States is not there does not mean that the trend is not going there. It's going there. In countries like South Korea, countries like Singapore, Switzerland, Estonia. Estonia did their own coin called Est coin on the national level. So I'm not here to hype up everything and say, hey, let's go and buy, sell your house and double mortgage it and, and whatever. And use your trust fund to buy, to fully cash out and fully invest into Bitcoin. I'm not saying that. But I'm also not saying that, listen, it's a bubble and be aware of it and don't touch it, it's a fire, you're gonna get burnt. No, what I'm trying to say is this: if you have the right tools, you can profit dramatically from this whole industry because it presents the amazing volatility that no other industries present. To answer the question about cryptocurrencies, at this point of time in the United States, it's a stock of a decentralized company. It's a company that does not operate in a centralized fashion with a CEO, CFO, etc. It's just a decentralized company.
That's how investors think about it, and I totally agree. Ali, were you going to say something?
So actually, to Peter's point here, that you said that there's a lot of volatility, and that's one thing that a currency should not have. It should have a stable value, so that if one day you get your wages in Bitcoin, and the next day Bitcoin falls, and you have no money to actually buy food for yourself. So that's one thing that that's why Bitcoin cannot, at its current stage, be used as a currency. It's more like a store of value, like gold, for example. So that's an important thing to.
It's true and not true. Then Colombian peso is also not a currency because it's more volatile than USD. Just because there is extra volatility, absolutely. At this point of time, extra volatility does hurt the status of cryptocurrencies to be used as a currency. But once the volatility is gone, and it will be gone once the market becomes more mature and once the market capitalization, which is a very important factor, because once the market capitalization actually grows up and becomes very similar to gold, then the volatility will drop because the market cap and the volatility have a direct correlation. So at that point of time, and certain countries are showing that to us, that it will actually become a currency.
Can I just say, this is a very smart 5-year-old.
So you will go to Harvard.
I didn't follow it.
Well, hang on. So Ali's point of view was that it also can be thought of like gold, like a store of value, and I think that's a very good analogy to think about it, and that is how people, a very volatile gold, but like gold, yes. Hanan.
Well, you guys are completely wrong. Bitcoin price is totally flat, but the dollar and the euro keep on going crazy. But if you think about the amount of money that you have not on you, but just in general. Just think about a number. Now then think about how much of that money do you have on you right now? $2, $5, 20, all right, maybe 0.001%. So what is money? Money is not what you have on you. Money is who keeps track of the money, right? So you have your money in Bank of America. You can log into your app and see how much you have. You can look in PayPal, see you have a couple of $1,000s there for some reason. And eBay randomly takes $50 out of that every month because I don't know why. But what Bitcoin is very simply a different way to keep a ledger, to keep a list of who has money. And really think about it. If I tell you, hey guys, I'll take care of your money right now, I'm going to write it down here, and you'll be like, well, are you really going to keep track of that? What's going to happen to that piece of paper? So how I keep track of that piece of paper with everybody's money really is the money, right? The whole point of Bitcoin, very simply, is that ledger is separated amongst tens of thousands of nodes of computers. And the most important thing, what makes it valuable, is that they can all, at any given moment, agree on the amount of Bitcoin each one of you has on the network. It does not require, and that's the big deal. Until now, it required a server in a bank or at PayPal or at one company that was centralized to tell you how much money you have. Now, it can be between me and you, and I can send you money, and no bank, there's no mommy bank and daddy government to take care of you. We are on our own, and that's what makes it amazing.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, so that's actually a good segue, I think, for talking about blockchain in general, because what you just described is blockchain technology. And blockchain is the underlying technology upon which Bitcoin is built. Okay, so think of it like the internet is the underlying technology upon which websites are built, like Uber and Google and Airbnb. Blockchain is the technology upon which Bitcoin and all of these other cryptocurrencies or altcoin, I don't know why I'm doing this, are built, right? And that's the best way to think about it. Let's see if Mr.
Do you mind if we just spend 1 minute on just going back to that for a moment?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry. I just think it's important, given that half the room, it's their first event.
Yeah.
So I'm going to fast forward to examples of use, such as South Korea and others. Ultimately, what I found to be comforting for me, who's putting a lot at stake reputation-wise on getting into and behind an industry early, was that it all comes down to trust. So it's trust of the information, okay? It's integrity of the information. So what they're saying is there's all these people all saying, yeah, he has money, instead of one place saying that I have money. So that's number one. Number two, again, just being in consumer retail for so many years, consumer behavior is important, right? So we went from a time when in, I don't know, the early 80s, 70s, if I needed $20, I'd go to a bank, I'd have to give them a book, they'd stamp, give me the book, they'd take $20 out and tell me I have a new balance. Well, that changed, right, to an ATM machine. So we went to a point where, okay, I have this card, I can stick it in here, money comes out. Well, this is awesome, okay, just put in 4 digits, and so forth. Then we moved to credit cards. So think about it, credit card, what happens? If we went out to dinner tonight, right, we would just go to some place, somebody bring us a bunch of food, something to drink, have a good time. $180 later, they're trusting that when they bring that over, and I gave them a piece of plastic, I still gave them that piece of plastic. They ran it somewhere, somebody told them I had money. Somebody told them I had some money. I didn't give them a pound of silver, right? So, and they let me leave after I signed something. So, just wanted to say behavior and how we appreciate and consume that behavior is really what's going to make this go. And so I'm of the big belief that, okay, in the 30, 40, 50, I'm 50 years old in a couple weeks, in the time frame that I've used money, used credit cards, used other forms of currency in different nations, I'm okay with it. Even in the military, the wallet system. You know, they're relying on somebody in Pakistan or Afghanistan calling somebody in Baltimore and saying, hey, he's good for the money or she's good for the money, give it
I'm
to
sorry,
him.
just how does it work in the military? I don't know.
No, I'm saying, so in some of these nations, such as Pakistan or Afghanistan, some of these rural, you know, have no systems. They rely basically on honor. And so it's a system, and it moves money. Part of what I didn't get into, but I was the first ever liaison from the United States Central Command to the United States government. And one of my jobs was to be involved in following terrorist financing. So you have to understand how people move money. And in those parts of the world, there is no bank, there is no branch, there is no ATM. They're just calling somebody up and somebody's moving money and so forth. So I know others might have more experience as well or stories. Go ahead.
That's
Just to push back a little bit.
Sure.
I'm actually from Pakistan.
Sure.
They have banks.
Obviously, you have banks, obviously. But I was talking about certain pockets of these nations that, you know, trust me, we follow it, and it's tough to follow because you don't have connectivity other than honor. And it goes back to me, what I believe strongly is that the opportunity here is to just get consumer behavior behind the trust factor, and then we'll be moving things. Be it treat it as a security now or move it as a payment later.
Yeah. So both Hanan and Giovanni are both talking about these deep questions about what is money, what is value, and these are the things you start thinking about when you invest in this stuff. And it's so intellectually fascinating to think about what makes something valuable to us all. So this is what's so great about being in this space. Let's see if we can get Mr. Oliver here. Talk about blockchain. Let's try this again. He's still as quiet as ever. He is British, so maybe he's just polite. Let's see if we can do this. I'm going to take this out. I'll do this. That was way worse. Yeah. Guys, any luck on that one?
Well, while they're fixing that, let's talk about the 5-year-old just for a second here, and
I just want to see.
keep the show moving. So, hands up, who likes paying bank fees? Yeah. Hands up, who likes going into their bank and wrestling with the teller in order to send a sum of money somewhere else other than the amount that you carry in your pocket, right? Almost no.
I don't have that experience.
Or not. Many people.
There we go. With Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, you can send, I mean in Bitcoin's case in particular, you can send literally as much money as you have to anywhere in the world for less than $1, without having to go anywhere, without having to have any middleman approve it in any sense of the word.
And $1 is a huge.
And that's the
it's
highest.
usually 10 cents.
Yeah, it's usually between 10 and 30 cents. And secondarily, going to some of the other points that have been raised about credit card transactions. You know, if you're explaining this to a 5-year-old, okay, so you have a magic piece of plastic, and it has a number on it, and you're going to give that number to someone. They're going to give it to somebody else that you've never met, and that person is going to give it to another person, and then that person magically has access to your bank account. Does that sound like a good system? Your average 5-year-old's probably going to say no.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how payment gateways work. You've got 3 or 4 middlemen in the process who you are trusting to do a good job with your data. And as we've all seen from Target to everybody else, they don't really do a good job with our data. And blockchain and cryptocurrency has the ability to solve
Just use
all
Facebook,
of
right?
that.
Don't do Target.
All right, thank you. That's a great analogy.
I believe that the really exciting thing about it is the potential of the innovative technology that it's built on, and that's something called blockchain. Now, normally, if I wanted to send money to someone across the world, a bank would need to verify that transaction, and it could take days. But with Bitcoin, it is vastly faster because no bank is involved. And that is because blockchain technology allows a record or a ledger of every Bitcoin transaction ever made to be stored not in one place, but across vast numbers of computers. That is part of what people mean when they say Bitcoin is decentralized. And decentralization has a lot of theoretical advantages, from speed to security.
That, I just realized, wasn't funny at all. But it's a very funny piece if you watch the whole thing, and I think it's a terrific introduction to all this stuff we're talking about. But let me talk a little bit about this concept of decentralization, because this is so important to understanding this. Everything we've built as a human species, all of our greatest institutions, are centralized. Companies and governments and the Roman Catholic Church, they're centralized. But decentralized is different. It's different. There's no middleman. We all own it, and yet nobody owns it. So think about the internet. It's silly to think that somebody will go buy the internet, right? It's too big. Nobody owns it, and yet everybody owns it. And so hearing about some of these examples is kind of useful. If you think about libraries, where we used to have to go to learn everything, versus the internet, which is totally decentralized. I mean, we talk about the Enlightenment, where we had suddenly the Gutenberg press, and we had books every. I mean, imagine right now we have the sum total of human knowledge in our pocket in a phone. Do you understand the implications of that? The time we're living in right now, and that's what decentralization of knowledge has done. Or take Microsoft software versus open source software. Open source is free. Anybody can use it. Anybody can modify it. You can even sell it. That's the difference between centralized and decentralized. Or encyclopedias. Remember those? When you had to go look things up in this big, thick book in the library. But now we have Wikipedia, which is decentralized. Everybody contributes to it. So I want to give you these examples as kind of a flavor so you understand what we mean when we say decentralized. And all the blockchain projects we're talking about, all the cryptocurrencies and all these new coins or tokens that we'll be talking about, are all built using decentralized technology. This is key to understanding how blockchain works. I want to ask the panel now, what are some of your favorite stories or use cases of the blockchain in this decentralized way?
I can take that one. So part of what I do is also advise companies on their blockchain strategy. If you may, over the past 1 year, I've been advising over a dozen companies. And one of the use cases that I found really fascinating was this company out of Norway that is looking to create a token economy of plastic waste. So you turn in, let's say, plastic bottles, and in return you will get tokens. And these tokens can then be used to exchange it with fiat or other utility that it can provide. And I have some background working with the UN Environment Program, and I thought that was a really fascinating use case.
So I'll translate. So token is like a little unit of value, sort of like Bitcoin, right? And tokens are how we sort of measure value on the blockchain. So what you're saying is it's almost like a carbon credits program, that when you would give a plastic back in and redeem it, instead of going to your recycle center, you now earn tokens that can be traded on markets. That's awesome. I've heard of solar tokens as well, where you earn tokens for generating solar power. These things have the potential to really transform our energy consumption. Yeah, Peter.
We are advising right now a public company that trades on the stock exchange, registered with the SEC. They did issue the 8K statement, which is the official financial statement that we are the official advisor. So what they're doing is this. They are the supply chain for rubber products. So they do have distribution here in the United States, they have manufacturing in China, and they have obviously logistics between. So they get Taiwanese or Chinese made products, rubber products, and transport them here to the United States and then sell it. So that's the business model. Now, there are a bunch of distributors, there are a bunch of logistics companies, and there are a bunch of manufacturers on the back end. So what these guys want to do, they want to create a token that would serve as a payment mechanism between all these stakeholders in this chain. And by doing that, they will eventually kill themselves as a company. So they will create a decentralized network where every single player is a validator of that transaction. There are no middle people anymore. There are no banks, there are no clearing offices, there's nobody in between. Just stakeholders themselves approve and verify every single transaction. By doing that, they said that the transaction fees right now are 3 to 4%, they would drop it to 0.90 of 1%. So they will basically make it 3 times cheaper. And they use the tokens as a transfer.
So this is what we call a supply chain. It's how we get all of our goods back and forth between different countries. And you're saying we could decentralize the whole supply chain.
The whole supply chain. Decentralize everything.
Yeah, which is a very big idea. Yeah, Ali.
So you asked about an interesting use case. So I grew up in Pakistan and I was given a very curated version of the world, and that was because the governments censor most of the journalistic information, media information on the internet. So the internet is actually highly centralized, I would say here. Most of the internet, the information, it lies in these big data centers, these big cloud hosting servers, such as Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, and it's highly centralized. And it's very easy to censor information, and especially for authoritarian regimes, it's very easy to just cut off certain parts of the internet to their people. And that's why I got interested in the distributed systems, and that's why we came up with Encrypt. And what we want to do with this is to create a distributed hosting service for media content, so that even if governments want to censor something, they cannot, because it's all across, and there's a lot of redundancy. The content is present on all these different computers who are actually using the information. So even if they censor some parts of it, the information is going to travel from computer to computer and eventually reach you. And that's why that's something that was really close to my heart, and that's why I am doing that.
So let's say you're a journalist in a country that does not respect freedom of speech, and you're able to store this information on the blockchain in a way that's distributed. Nobody owns it, it's not on a server somewhere, but it's basically spread out across millions of servers, and in that way protect free speech and protect journalism.
John, do we have a question, guys?
Yeah.
Techniques in cryptography, but we can go deeper into it. There's a question right there.
You will have a very smart 5-year-old.
Yeah, I was going to say, before we go to the next question, can we just spend a small amount more time? Because I know some people, this is what they came here to kind of wrap their heads around. So I'm going to use two analogies. One is Russian nesting dolls, and the other is knitting. Okay? So a blockchain, as Navroop said, is literally a chain of blocks. And a block is basically a bunch of data, right? It's a bunch of labels, records, transactions, whatever you want to call them. What is unique about the blockchain is, like a set of nesting dolls, when you create a new block, which is what these miners that you hear about are doing, it contains all of the previous blocks, right? So it's literally like a little nesting doll. If you crack that block open, it's got all the previous records, whatever those records are, embedded in it, all the way back to the very beginning of time, whatever that means for your particular blockchain.
Nick, can I jump in and say, so it doesn't actually contain it, it just contains an indicator of that, and that's a Merkle tree.
So to go to the knitting analogy, as you build out your blockchain, which is what these mining computers out there are trying to solve a very hard math problem, and when the first one past the post says, I've solved it, and everybody verifies it, that is used effectively to put like a tamper-proof seal on that package of records and the pointer to the previous package of records. Okay, so you get a Russian nesting doll with a tamper-proof sticker on it, basically. But it's somewhat like knitting in that if somebody goes back and tries to fiddle with one of those earlier transaction records that's in this blockchain, you basically have to undo all of the stitches you've done since then, right, to get back to that transaction. And then you have to re-knit them all so it looks exactly like it did before. And because of the amount of computational effort that it takes to solve this hard math problem, that's a physical impossibility for the most part. Today. Yes, that may change. And there's other dynamics. Again, I'm simplifying a lot here. There's other dynamics that come into play.
One more thing to make it clear. I'm giving the phone. This is the phone, right? Can you guys say yes or no?
Yes.
Can you guys raise your hands if this is a phone? All of you, please. So if it's more than 50%, that's called consensus. Now, I'm giving this phone to you. Have you guys seen that? Have you guys seen that transaction? Can you raise hands if you've seen that? More than 50%. Bank charges 3% for that, from each transaction. and instead of the bank charging 3%, you guys will be paid for voting.
And now there's consensus.
That's called
that I have the
decentralization.
phone.
Yeah, that's a good
And,
analogy.
and the other wrinkle that I would add to that
This is the
is,
first 5-year-old that actually will understand that.
is that your set of nesting dolls that you're building out is duplicated millions of times across the planet. So there is no one official copy. There's millions of copies that are all continually being added to and kept in sync with each other.
Giovanni.
Yeah, so I think a lot of where people get lost, including myself, you know, at the beginning and certainly still, you know, as I learn more and more, we get confused between the monetary aspects of the whole industry, right, to other transactions. I think that's where we kind of get lost, and we're trying to say, oh, wait a minute, you know, what are you talking about email? Like, you know, we get lost. The monetary stuff, we kind of understand it. I think if the example you just gave, even in a phone transaction, right? So I'm going to give a non-monetary transaction that I think was really going to be my example of a story, a future, hopefully a future story. And that is this, that I think we can use the blockchain to significantly help combat the opioid epidemic, okay? Because now we can actually allow the physicians and the pharmacies to track the pharmaceuticals on the blockchain, okay? So just think about, you know, the transparency, the accountability, everything involved with that. So as we track pharma and really understand where all these things happen. If I could just tie it in just one more time on the military side, a 9/11 happened because of stovepipes. Okay, so information that was at the FBI never made it to the CIA, or the CIA never made it to Treasury or the Department of State and so forth. And so just think about all that connectivity. That's what's happening here on the information. And I think on the verification side, that was an excellent example. If 50% or more are saying it's true, make it go. And that transaction happens. And if I could just stay on the government side because I think it's important, you know, I envision a world where there's no DMV. Understand? Because why should there be, right? Why should there be? And so, and you all can correct me if I'm wrong because I might be oversimplifying it, but all of the data that belongs to us, our identity, things we own, right, from a title to a vehicle or a car or a birth certificate or my transcripts, you know. The reality is I envision it like a bank having a vault and having a safety deposit box, and I have all my stuff in there. And every time I need it, and I say, hey, you know what, send it to Wharton, I'm doing X. Okay. They're going to shoot it down there, they're going to open it up, they get it, that expires. Anytime I need it again, I got to go back into my box to get it. Okay? And if I want to sell him my car, well, there's going to be a way, once it's on the blockchain and it's verified, I'm going to just push my button on my phone. I don't need to go to people. So for me, you know, I'm here tonight because I envision that world. I'm saying, oh, you know, someone challenged me the other day, how are you going to save $1 billion, $1.5 billion? What do you mean? Think about all the people we have, right, in government to collect taxes, fines, or fees, right? To do what? To collect money, to then pay the people to collect the money from us. It's kind of weird, right? So it's a circular economy that'll go away with that pushing of a button. And so that's, and I'm just using that as an example on itself, but you know, you fast forward, we went back to the timeline, boy, do I see a future. And I'm like, this has to happen. And so I'm excited about it. But anyway, just in more layman's terms, I hope I gave that example. That's not monetary.
Let me give you just a real short, tangible example of exactly what Giovanni's talking about here. So Sweden, right, not known as the world's biggest economy by any stretch, right? It's a nice place, but it is quite small. Sweden has implemented a pilot for blockchain for land registry. So basically when you're buying and selling your house and you have to do a title search, they've moved that to the blockchain. In 1 year, between eliminating lost paperwork, delayed paperwork, and fraud, they are estimating a savings of 100 million euros. And that's an economy the size of Sweden. So imagine that on every paper trail that's out there, especially government paper trails, massively multiplied by an economy the size of ours. And you start to get a sense of how much of a change this can make.
If I could also get people though excited, because I know a lot of you, some of you maybe in here or family and friends that work in areas that need to have jobs, right? You're like, oh my God, what's going to happen to jobs? Reality is, right now, do you understand that no one is certifying or providing degrees to people who are working on the blockchain? They're self-taught on open code, open source, okay? So there's the opportunity. Let's create the certifications, let's create the degree programs, let's get everybody back on it, let's get someone in systems where they're good to go in a year, 2 years, maybe they don't need to go 4, 8, whatever it is. But then you have the educators, then you have the companies. I sat at a table in DC just a few weeks ago. The woman on my right was ready to take on the whole auto insurance industry. The one on my left was ready to take on all higher education. I mean, the companies that are going to be built here, this is insane. Anything that's a .com right now, get ready. It's going to be a .coin, okay? That's what's going to happen. It's massive. It's absolutely massive.
I really appreciate your question, sir. What's your name?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Sean.
Sean, thanks for your question, because it's a good question, but it's a hard question to answer, as you can hear. And it's a little bit like saying, well, how does a computer work? Well, I don't know, like it's electricity and logic gates, but I don't really know. But I know what it can be used for. And if you remember a time back in the 80s when like everybody was asking, why do I need a personal computer at my house? And all we could say was games. Games, pretty much, Mom. And then there was like maybe personal finance. That was it. Well, look at what we do with the internet and with computers now. Everything, everything. And that is kind of where we're going with blockchain. But I also appreciate, Giovanni, that it seems like maybe we lost folks from the store of value, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, to blockchain and all these other types of use cases that are going to be built on it. No, you only get one question, Sean.
To add to what John was saying, the problem you're having is that it is bloody complicated. It really is. And it takes weeks of just being glued to YouTube and watching videos of people explain it. And once you have a French guy, an Indian, an Italian, and a banker all explain it to you, and a Japanese guy in Japanese, then it starts to make sense. So just watch.
How many people know how internet works? Not too many people, but everybody knows how to use it.
Yeah.
So we'll make blockchain usable for everybody, don't worry.
That's what we're doing. All right, Sean, one more.
Yeah, well, in terms of the registry, how blockchain might apply to DMV is that when you buy a car, it would be registered on the blockchain. And so another transaction, you sell it, or something happens, and that gets registered on the blockchain. And so anytime something, before it gets registered on the blockchain, it has to get verified with this consensus, with a mathematical algorithm that's solved by these mining people.
Exactly.
And so
With
you
no
don't
line.
need a centralized bureaucracy. You have your phone, you have the blockchain, you can access, and when you go to buy a car, you can access the records of that car without the DMV.
So here's the thing, here's an interesting point you just skimmed, and I want to stop and mention. So the number one problem in the adoption of internet was, well, how do I know that the other person is who he or she says that person is, right? So the identity piece of it is actually the biggest part of the puzzle. It's the biggest one that needs to be solved, and if you guys, probably many of you do know that identities can be anonymous at the moment and on the public chains. So when we are looking at adoption of blockchain, it, I think, is probably the most promising use case. And again, you want to talk about two kind of identities. First is your self-sovereign identity, which is you are who you are, the kind of ID card that the government gives you. And then, you know, the question is, really, government is the only authority to sort of give you these ID cards. And I think the second one is your functional identity as to what you do with your identity, right? So this example, so those of us who go to these blockchain conferences quite a bit is, so you go to the bar, and all the bartender needs to know is that you're 18 years of age. He or she doesn't need to see your photo, doesn't need to know where you're born, your exact age, so on and so forth. So what you can do with the blockchain